Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Box Office Talk. This is the show where I break down what happened at the box office, see if my predictions for the top 5 are correct, then make predictions for next week's top 5. So let's get right on into it. Last week I predicted that number 1 would be The Marvels, number 2 would be Five Nights at Freddy's, number 3 would be Taylor Swift The Eras Tour, number 4 would be The Holdovers, and number 5 would be Killers of the Flower Moon. And I was so close, guys. I got 4 out of 5 of my predictions right for this week, and there was one movie that just came out of nowhere as far as like its holding power that I could not believe, actually is doing better. So we'll talk about that in just a little bit, but we have to clear through this one really quick because this was the obvious prediction to make, but what wasn't so obvious was how poorly it was going to do, and that is number 1, The Marvels. Now, of course, this is the sequel technically to Captain Marvel, which grossed over $1 billion at the worldwide box office. So surely, people were expecting like, okay, it might not be the same level of success that was kind of caught up in the hype wave of Endgame as well. And of course, obviously, not just the SAG-AFTRA strike going on, so there's a little lack of promotion, but also in general, there are some mixed feelings on the MCU, people's anticipation towards certain projects, some hesitance towards it. I don't think, though, that people really expected the technically sequel to Captain Marvel to open as poorly as it did, though. It opened with $47 million this weekend. And just to put that into perspective, if you're wondering how low is that really, the lowest opening weekend for the MCU this entire time has been The Incredible Hulk with $55 million. So this technically now, $8 million below that opening weekend. This is technically the lowest opening weekend for the entire MCU, this film. It took them, how long now? I don't know how many films it's been, but it's been like about 15 years of the MCU, and now we've gotten one that has rivaled The Incredible Hulk for lowest opening weekend. That's kind of astonishing. Some other stats for the domestic numbers so far is that it still needs $87 million until it outgrosses the entire domestic run of The Incredible Hulk. Normally I would be like, well, potentially it's got a chance to, but because of the heavy competition next weekend and then the rest of the 2023 movie season and just the kind of lack of word of mouth surrounding this one, like the last I checked, the Rotten Tomatoes score was like just barely fresh and the audience score was pretty high, but I don't know how that'll translate as far as positive word of mouth. Like, will this be able to hold over well? I'm not really even sure. On the bright side, though, for Nia DaCosta, this is her highest opening weekend. It's $25 million over the Candyman opening weekend and $47 million over Little Woods, her first film, because that was limited release, so of course it's going to be much higher. And then also, it has outgrossed Little Woods by $47 million, and it needs $14 million until it outgrosses Candyman. So at least for Nia DaCosta, the director, this will, probably get her name out there. We'll be seeing more other projects from her, and she's a talented filmmaker for sure if you've seen Little Woods, and I thought Candyman was solid, so I would love for her to get out there more, and hopefully this is a good stepping stone for that. But as far as the context of the MCU, not great at all. You know what I mean? Now let's go over into some worldwide numbers because it is sitting at $110 million. And we'll talk about the budget in a second, but this is really low for a worldwide debut too. For Nia DaCosta, it's $110 million over Little Woods and $33 million over Candyman. So it's already her highest grossing film for worldwide. So congratulations, Nia, on that. Can't wait to see more from you. For the MCU, it needs $155 million to outgross The Incredible Hulk, which both domestically and worldwide is the lowest earning one. This has got to be a big bummer. And I know that they're already kind of adjusting some plans and they're reconfiguring certain things. The only MCU film that is coming out next year is Deadpool 3, and then it's going to be 2025. We'll get a bunch more, but they're taking a little bit of a break. They've already talked about how Captain America is getting reworked and Blade is going through hopefully its last little bit of rewrites to get that right. I don't know. I'm not trying to be like the doomsday guy for like the MCU, like, oh, it's all crashing down, because the MCU has always kind of gone up and down, up and down. Usually it's kind of a little less drastic though, as far as like, well, this one didn't make as much as this, but it's kind of low stakes because it's Ant-Man, or critically this movie wasn't as well received, but it's still, it doesn't completely alter anything, and it still made a decent enough money. This is kind of, we're getting to a point now where it's like you go from Ant-Man and the Wasp, which had like really divisive reactions, and then Guardians 3, which is mostly positive, then Secret Invasion, which is like everybody kind of hates that, and then Loki season 2, okay, people are on board Loki season 2, people are saying this is better, and then this again, where it's the drastic kind of divisive responses are just, it's kind of wild. It'll be interesting to see how the MCU adjusts going forward, if they are able to. I don't, like I said, I'm not trying to be doomsday guy saying it's all coming down. I don't really think that, but I do think this will have some implications going forward. And I know some people will be quick to point out, like, you gotta mention that SAG-AFTRA, the strikes, which just ended because of the tentative agreement. I believe they're voting to ratify it on Tuesday, but the strikes are over. They can promote the movies again, but for the longest time, there was no promotion for this. They got Iman Vellani surprising some fans at a screening, and Brie Larson was on Jimmy Fallon, but this is like last minute stuff. And, you know, promotion does go a long way when it comes to people's awareness of a film, obviously. But that being said, also, if I can kind of counter that, the MCU is kind of one of those things where it was kind of seen originally as like, you don't really need a lot of promotion for that. As long as you have that Marvel logo and you put out a trailer, people are kind of on board. And now we're kind of at a point where it's like, if they really are, you know, relying so much on, you know, actor promotion to get people aware that it's out or to even care, you know, that is kind of still a bad thing. You know, I'm not trying to discount that, you know, actors promotion obviously helps box office performance, and I'm glad the strikes are over. But still, like, this is just one of those things where it should probably stand above that. And we're in a weird part of the MCU. I don't want to complicate things any further. I don't even want to really bring up the Captain Marvel stats, because it's like, as far as like comparing like how it did compared to Captain Marvel, it's just kind of depressing, you know. Obviously it's lower, and even when it outgrosses the Incredible Hulk, if it can, it's not going to be anywhere near close to outgrossing Captain Marvel in the overall MCU stuff. By the way, before I move on, I just realized I didn't ever mention in the recording talking about what the budget of this movie was. I was talking about how it's oh man, it's so weird how it's so low grossing, and this will affect things. And you might be wondering, why is that? The budget, it range, like, according to Wikipedia, it's either ranging from about like 220 million to about 270. And I kind of, for the sake of simplicity, let's say a rough average, because a lot of these movies have kind of aimed at this point. Let's say the budget is on average 250 million. Even with that kind of split down the middle from 220 to 270, that is still way too much to see this opening weekend of 110 million worldwide and think like, oh yeah, they're in the clear. They are absolutely not in the clear, unless it has like the craziest staying power we've ever seen, but I doubt it. Have we seen some of these drop-offs lately for some of the Marvel movies outside of Guardians 3? Like, yeah, it's not gonna happen, you know what I mean? And a bummer, but shit, I don't know what else to say, you know. It's surely a bummer for some of the fans out there that probably appreciated this. I don't know what else to say, you know. The reactions on this are kind of divisive. Like I said, last time I checked, it was kind of positive, but who knows how much that slipped, and it was only like barely positive on Rotten Tomatoes. So that kind of just goes to show you that there are still some people out there who are kind of mixed on this. What do you do, you know? Guardians of the Galaxy 3 stays winning. Let's move on to number 2, which is Five Nights at Freddy's, making $9 million, adding to a domestic total of $127 million. It still needs $4 million until it outgrosses Angelina Jolie's Tomb Raider film for the number 6 video game movie spot for the domestic runs. Worldwide, it is now sitting at $251 million, so it's outgrossed Resident Evil Retribution and the 2016 Assassin's Creed by $11 million, and now needs $22 million until it outgrosses the Jolie Tomb Raider film. So that movie is still winning. I don't really have anything else of interest to say other than now that the strikes are over, Matthew Lillard has kind of hinted at, like, yeah, it's going to be interesting when they finally, you know, greenlight the sequel and announce it, because we got some cool stuff planned. And hopefully they do, you know, fans really responded well to this, and hopefully they do for the rest. And once again, ditch the fucking Peacock thing. Think of how much more money you could have made. Anyways, number 3 is Taylor Swift The Eras Tour, making $5 million, adding to a domestic total of $172 million. So for the 2023 list, it is a couple $100,000 over the run of Dead Reckoning, Mission Impossible. It now needs $2 million until it outgrosses Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and also enters the top 10 domestic runs for the year of 2023. And who knows how long that'll last, because of a couple other films that'll come out this year, but the fact that it can even get there is pretty spectacular. Like I keep saying, this is kind of a phenomenon for these concert films, you know. It's wild. Worldwide, it is sitting at $240 million, and it's still behind Sound of Freedom by $5 million, but it's going to be outgrossing that soon, and good. Let's move on to number 4, which is Priscilla, actually holding over pretty well. I kind of talked about last weekend. I don't really know what the word of mouth on this thing is going to be. The budget is $20 million, but will it be able to double that, and will it get a worldwide total? And we don't have a worldwide total yet, and it hasn't doubled it yet, the budget, but it made 4.7 million this weekend, and as far as the domestic run here, it is sitting at 12 million, so they're getting pretty close. Hopefully word of mouth can continue to spread on this thing, even though next weekend's going to be pretty packed, which we'll talk about for the predictions. It has, for Sofia Coppola, I neglected to mention this last week, and I feel so bad about it, but as far as her filmography, it is actually in the top 3 domestic runs of all time for her. It has outgrossed On the Rocks by 12 million, The Beguiled by 2 million, The Bling Ring by 7 million, Somewhere by 11 million, and The Virgin Suicides by 8 million, and now needs 3 million until it outgrosses Marie Antoinette, which we'll surely be seeing that happen, and then it needs 32 million to outgross Lost in Translation. So if word of mouth is strong enough, like if it does by chance get an Oscar nomination, maybe they'll get another extended run and we'll see that number go up. Maybe it does have a chance of outgrossing Lost in Translation, but right now it's looking like it's going to be Sofia Coppola's second highest grossing domestic run of all time, which is pretty damn good. Number 5 is Killers of the Flower Moon, making 4.6 million, adding to a domestic total of 59 million. It is still behind Hugo now by 14 million for the domestic runs, but worldwide it is sitting at 126 million, so it is now outgrossed Casino by 16 million and sits behind Hugo here by 54 million. So behind Hugo in both spots. Good on you, Scorsese. I've already talked about everything that there is to be talked about. Other than, like, you know, it's still holding over pretty well. Like, it held over a little better than I was kind of originally anticipating. So, you know, there you go, even if it is only by a little bit. So congrats to Scorsese. You know, it's not a total flop as much as most people will try to tell you that. And I've also already talked about the stipulations from the other weekend, so we don't need to keep repeating that. Let's move on to number 6, which is The Holdovers. I thought for sure, because of word of mouth, and because it is kind of more of like a anyone can see this kind of drama, maybe it would get into the top 5. It didn't, but it made 3.2 million this weekend, which adds to a domestic total of 4.2 million. I'm not sure what the budget is for this film yet. We don't know how it's doing financially. I'm assuming this movie will get nominated at least for Paul Giamatti's performance, and maybe the word of mouth that, yeah, it's a good film for anybody to see. Maybe that'll carry it over. It is a movie that is also more closely set to Christmas, so maybe this is a perfect movie to kind of see continue to rise in its domestic run as we get closer and closer to Christmas. Or maybe it won't, I don't know. But as far as Alexander Payne, it has outgrossed Citizen Ruth by 4 million domestically, and now needs 10 million until it outgrosses Election. So it's not like Sofia Coppola, where the other films that she has made have had like smaller runs, and then Alexander Payne's are a little bit higher, but still, you know, outgrossing Citizen Ruth. There you go. Moving on to number 7, which is Journey to Bethlehem, which I didn't know was coming out, and I got worried for a bit when I finally, like, realized it. Like, oh no, is this going to disrupt the top 5? And it didn't. It was Priscilla, but, you know, here it is at number 7, making 2.4 million. It's only on a budget of 6 million, though. We don't have a worldwide total to add to this thing yet, but I mean, I don't know, Bethlehem, Christmas, Jesus, maybe, well, similar to The Holdovers, more of a Christmas kind of movie. Maybe if we hold off a little bit, it'll, you know, rise up in the ranks and they can double that budget. But I don't know, and I don't really know much else about this movie, or even who's in it. So let's move on to number 8, which is Paw Patrol, the Mighty Movie, making 1.76 million, adding to a domestic total of 64 million. Worldwide, it is sitting at $184 million. So it's still doing really well. You know, maybe it'll get that 16 million worldwide and get to 200 million before it leaves the top 10. But then again, we do have a lot of movies coming out next weekend, and I don't think this movie can compete or stick around. So it was nice knowing you, Paw Patrol. Let's move on to number 9, which is Radical. I still don't know what the budget for this movie is, but it made 1.75 million this weekend, and now adding to a domestic total of 5.2. Worldwide, it is sitting at 13 million. So maybe the budget, you know, wishful thinking, maybe this budget was low enough and they were able to just now, or maybe soon, you know, were able to double that budget. One can only hope, you know. And finally, number 10, The Exorcist Believer, making 1.1 million, adding to a domestic total of 64 million. It is still behind the original film by $166 million. Worldwide, it is sitting at 132 million, which is 296 million behind the original film. So, you know, at the very least, you know, they quadrupled their $30 million budget. They weren't able to make 5 times that, you know, crossing over 150 million, but you know, you can save just for this one singular film. It was a success. And we've talked about before, it's not really enough to justify paying 400 million for the entire trilogy that hasn't been completely made yet, but whatever, you know, I don't know, they'll figure something out. I don't fucking care. I don't care what Blumhouse is doing. Now it's time for the fun part, the predictions for next week's top 5. Number 1, I have to go with The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I think, The Hunger Games was huge back when it was coming out. It petered off a little bit as we approached the end of Mockingjay, but I think it's been a couple years and we're doing a prequel, based on a prequel novel that kind of rejuvenated the fan base. I think this will have a lot of people's attention. And then number 2, I think will be Trolls Band Together. I think Hunger Games will squeak over that one just because Hunger Games, Trolls Band Together is kind of a more like strictly kids thing and parents can go see it and maybe they'll be entertained. But teens and then adults, will definitely go towards the Hunger Games, I think, more so. And I think that'll outnumber the kids in that regard. I could be wrong, but that's where my prediction is landing here. Number 3, maybe it's too generous, but I think the Marvels, I think it'll probably have a pretty solid drop-off, but I'm wishful thinking that it'll get to number 3. Number 4, I think will be Thanksgiving. And then number 5, Next Goal Wins, I think we'll be able to squeak on in there too. Just judging by, FNAF has only made $9 million this weekend, and we're getting these 4 new releases that are releasing pretty wide. So, and there's kind of a bit of attention for each of them, so maybe it'll be able to outshine FNAF. But what are your predictions for next week's top 5? Leave them in the comments below. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.